Alrighty, hello. Let's take a look at horizontal rules and line breaks. So first things first, I'm going to work on one of the paragraphs that we actually have at the very beginning. We created these two paragraphs here. And so I've got a paragraph and I've got a second paragraph. And let's say I want some sort of line in between them. I have this thing called an HR, a horizontal rule. And because it doesn't take any text inside of it, it does not need a closing tag. Again, this is a self-closing tag, just like image. Let's go ahead and save this. And it should show up right in here. And so when I go and refresh, bam, there it is. It shows up right there. And a horizontal rule is a block element. It's going to take up the full width, as you can see. It takes up the full width, and all it is a line between your text. So it's really good for separating headers or content or things like that. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you was a BR tag. So we have a horizontal rule, but we also have a BR tag. So let's say we wanted to separate this onto its own line, but not its own paragraph, but we wanted it to look like this. So we have our first line of lorem here, and then audio, sunt, whatever, is on its own line as well. Okay, so I just saved that, and VS Code just automatically fixed that up for me. So if I go back to the page, nothing's changed. And again, that's because in HTML, white space is not important. Your browser doesn't care about it. What it does care about is if you want a new line, you can just type BR. And this is simply a line break. BR for break. And if I save and refresh my page, we're going to see that right here is going to be a new line, just like that. So this started a new line over here. And now we have a horizontal rule and a line break side by side. Or I guess not side by side, but you know, in the same lesson. What I would like you to do is give both of those a shot. This is super easy. Shouldn't take you more than about 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds. Create a horizontal rule and then create a line break inside of a paragraph. Let's take a look at HTML comments. So a comment is basically a piece of code you can write, and that's not going to be executed by your browser. And it looks like this. So it's less than sign. You can see that all of our HTML elements look like that. One of those weird times where we actually see an exclamation mark, and then a dash, and then we can put our text here. And then it ends with a dash, and then a greater than sign. And so if I save this, and it's typically, so far, it would show up above my Welcome to HTML 101 text. But if I go back here, hit refresh, it doesn't show up at all. However, if I right click, view page source, there it is. So don't ever put passwords, secrets, credit cards, answers to anything. Don't put anything secret in there because it's not actually secret. It is 100% accessible to all of your users. So this is not a good place to write secrets. What it is good for is explaining what we're doing. So we can say, this is a tutorial. And let's maybe break this onto separate lines. This is a tutorial course on HTML. We are learning HTML from scratch. And so again, I can save that, come back here, refresh my source code. You can see the source code has actually changed. Go back here, refresh the actual page, and it's not rendered. And this is called an HTML comment. So I say this is an HTML comment. Now what's really cool about this is you can actually comment out existing code as well. So let's go ahead and comment this out. So let's do the opening sign, and you can see it turned all of my text gray all the way down to my page, to the bottom of my page. And let's go over here and close that, and you can see the syntax highlighting kicks in again, lets me know that things are working the way I want them to work. Save that, and because I have commented this out, it's still going to show up in the source code. We see it here, it's in the source code. But because it's between an opening and closing comment syntax, let's refresh, and we can see that it no longer shows up. The browser says it's a comment, do not execute it, do not render it. It's really just a useless piece of text to the browser. It's more useful to humans than it is to computers. And that's an HTML comment. Now you're going to see some of these every now and then. It's not too often you see these, but when you do see them, just know that this is the stuff that's not going to show up when you load your page. Okay, let's take a look at lists. There are two types of lists. There's an ordered list and an unordered list, and we'll demo both of these. Now this is interesting because this is one of those elements that requires nesting. And again, it's important to know about nesting here. So I'm going to throw a title in here called lists. Now the first one I want to tackle is an ordered list, an OL. Now we could say something in here, and let's preview this. Scroll down my page and it says something in here, but it doesn't actually know what to do. It's sort of like a list, but if I wanted to make a second bullet point, this just doesn't work. What we can do is say, because this is a list, it needs a list item. And all I'm doing here is saying list item opening tag, list item closing tag, and now we have two elements that are nested inside of our ordered list. So save and refresh, and now it lists for us. 1, 2, 3, so on, so on, so on. It counts for us. I didn't write 1, I didn't write 2. That's an ordered list. Now an unordered list, very, very similar, but it's not going to have the counting. It's just going to have bullet points. So I could do UL, and then I could do LI, and this is a list item. Hit tab because I have that Emmet abbreviation. Point number 1, copy that entire line down to the one below it, point 2, copy that entire line to the one below it, and I'm just using Control-C and Control-V, or Command-C and Command-V. And that copies my entire line for me. Let's go ahead and save that. And refresh. And we have bullet points. And so as we progress through HTML, you're getting a little bit more familiar with nesting and opening and closing tags and attributes and things like that. This is going to get a lot easier. And you've probably already noticed that if you've gone through all of the videos up until this point, that an ordered list, you already sort of know the syntax. You know that this is a nested element and that there's some text in there and that it has a closing and an opening tag. And then if we want another one, we just have another child element. So we've got a child li here, and the parent OL. And at this point, it's getting really, really easy for you to learn. And an example of that is the unordered list. So an ordered list has the numbering, obviously, because it's called an ordered list, but an unordered list doesn't have it. It just has bullet points. But the syntax is almost identical. The only thing we've changed here really is from OL to UL. And so you can see from here on out that learning HTML is just going to get faster and faster and faster. You're already learning all of the basics very, very quickly. So that's how we make a list. If you would like to pause the video here, go ahead, hit pause and try this out on your own. Make sure it shows up in your browser. When you're nice and ready, let's head on over to that next lesson. Let's talk about CSS tags. So this one is really interesting. We've only actually dealt with one element inside of our head, but with CSS, we could put it anywhere, but typically we put it in our head. And this one is a style. This is a style element. And what I'm saying here is CSS, and this stands for Cascading Style Sheets. There we go, Cascading Style Sheets. And I can comment that out so it doesn't actually show up in the browser. Now, what's interesting here is this does not accept HTML. Isn't that weird? So we're writing HTML, but this does not accept HTML. And at this point, we're getting into this thing called CSS, Cascading Style Sheets, which is a way for us to style our page. What this does take is CSS Markdown, Markup. Yeah, CSS language. And this is very, very different. This does not look like HTML at all. And you do not need to know this for this particular course, but this is a good transition into what you would be learning next. So let's say we wanted to change the entire background color to black, and we wanted to change all the color, the text color, to white. We can do that. We can say body, and you can see that this matches the element. And all we're going to do is an opening curly brace, background dash color, and you can see VS Code is very helpful. It's helping me understand what I'm supposed to be writing. Change that to black. And then I can change the font color, and you can actually see that MDN reference shows up. Sets the color of an element's text, color, white. And so this is going to select this element, the body, and everything in it, and it's going to try to apply these rules to it. So if I go back here and hit refresh, check that out. Our page now has white text with a black background. Now again, this is not something you need to know, and honestly I would say don't learn it, but I needed to show you what this is because you're going to see this style element all over the place. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment this out as well, refresh my page and bring it back to normal. Now if you wanted to, by all means, give this a shot, feel free to experiment with it, but know that you still have a lot more HTML to learn. You need to learn how to add videos and audio and things like that. And you need to learn those things before we learn CSS, or at least you should. That's a lot easier to learn one thing at a time instead of learning two things at a time. But if you wanted to experiment, have some fun with it, by all means, go for it. But this is the style tag. This is your CSS. And once again, no, you don't need to know this. I just wanted to show you this. Just as a heads up, you're going to see this tag in the wild in other source code that you view, like on Google.com, for instance. There's going to be some in there. Facebook.com probably has some. Instagram.com probably has some style elements inside of their HTML. So it's a common thing. And I just wanted to make sure you would be familiar with it. All right, we're done with CSS. Let's head on over to the next one where we learn basically the same concept, but for JavaScript. Hello and welcome to the world of JavaScript. Okay, so there are two things I want to talk about. One is how we add JavaScript to a page. There's a couple ways to do that. And the second way, or the second thing I want to talk about is do not learn JavaScript right now. It's going to be very tempting. You're going to hear people in Facebook groups and learning groups and LinkedIn groups and other courses saying you need to learn JavaScript. But that's not true. You need to learn HTML before you learn JavaScript. JavaScript is used to modify and work with HTML. And if you don't know HTML very well, you're not going to be able to learn JavaScript. So you need HTML first. That said, I'm going to show you how to add some JavaScript in here. So it starts with the script tag. And in here, again, because it's HTML, it doesn't really care about white space. However, we do not write HTML in here. We don't. We write JavaScript. We write JavaScript, or JS for short, in here. That is what's important, okay? So always remember that. I see a lot of people trying to write like a div inside of their script and it doesn't work, and that's because anything between the two script tags here, the opening and closing tag, your browser thinks is JavaScript and not HTML. And that's important to know because if you've taken my other course about web fundamentals, there are different engines in your browser. You have an engine for rendering HTML, an engine for rendering CSS, and an engine for rendering JavaScript. And it's saying, hey, use the JavaScript engine for this, not the HTML one. So let's go ahead and create an example here. Hello world. And you do not need to know this right now, but this is JavaScript. And all this is going to do is when I load the page, it's going to give me a little pop-up. So when I go back to my page, hit refresh, it says hello world, and then it shows my page. So it's executing the JavaScript and then the HTML. So that's one way. The other way you're going to see this tag being used is script. And what happens if I click this button? Oh, right there. That's perfect. Is instead of having all of your code in your page, you can have this code in another file like testjavascript.js, and you don't need that in here. You can get rid of that, and that code can live in another file. And so all we're saying here is use the script tag. So, hey, Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Edge, there's a JavaScript that I want you to render in here. The source, just like an image, let's scroll back up. Just like an image, src, source, is equal to, and then whatever the file name is. Now this is a relative file, a lot like this relative link. So it should be in the same folder. Now if this doesn't exist, nothing's going to happen. If this does exist, but there's nothing in there, nothing's going to happen. You actually need some JavaScript to execute. And again, that's not something we need to know right now. But what I'm going to do is, boom, comment that out. And that's just an HTML comment, and that makes sure that my browser says, hey, anything between this opening tag and this closing tag or the syntax, don't render it. It's allowed to live in there in the source code, but do not actually execute it. And if I go back to Chrome and I refresh the page, that alert goes away. So perfect. Now again, you do not need to know this. The reason why I wanted to show you this is because you're going to see scripts a lot. In today's modern web, there is a lot of JavaScript. And again, you need to know HTML in order to know JavaScript very well. but you're going to see a lot of scripts all over the place. And so when you see this, just know that everything in between the opening and closing script tag is actually going to be JavaScript and not HTML or CSS. Okie dokie, let's take a look at one cool thing here. So while you're learning to write code, you're going to want to be able to share your code with people. And it's really, really hard to safely share this kind of code with people. People put their files in zips and then share them in Facebook groups, and it looks really spammy and nobody knows if it's actually safe to download. And then if you have a question, your question doesn't get answered. It's just this whole thing that you want to avoid. There is a better way. So what you can do is you can go to codepen.io. And I want to create a new pen. Oh, look at that, all sorts of stuff. But I just want to create a regular new pen in here. And what this is going to do is give me HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to work with. Now, at this particular time, if you're taking this course, you probably don't need to know JavaScript, and you probably don't need to know CSS. You probably just need to know HTML. Now, in here, you can write anything. Hello world. And it just takes a second, but it does. It eventually renders for you. Now, the thing is, you do not need your doc type. You do not need HTML. You do not need body. You don't need those tags. What you do need is everything between the body tag all the way down to the closing body tag. Right there. So we can now copy, right click, paste. And this isn't necessarily going to show my images because, well, I'm saying, hey, CodePen, look for not second page, but Caleb's image.jpg. And this is where the alt text kicks in. And so it can't find that because it doesn't know. It's a website. It's not on my computer. And so it's looking for Caleb's image.jpg on the server. On someone else's computer, they don't have it yet, so that's not going to work. So just a heads up there. But you know, as you're writing more and more HTML and CSS and JavaScript down the road, you can do all of this in a CodePen. Now, the nice thing is you can name this. So, hello world. Let's go ahead and save that. And I just created a free CodePen account, by the way. It's completely free. You do not need to pay for CodePen. So please, while you're learning, do not pay for CodePen. You never need to pay for it. And you get this nice little link. And so if I open this up in another tab, I just copied and pasted that link. It shows up. And if I have another tab, paste it in there, it shows up. And what's really nice is it's saving all of your code. And so if you need to share your code in the Learning to Code Facebook group or in a project section on this platform, or really you need to share your code with a friend or a developer or a mentor or anyone whatsoever, even if you just want to show this off to your spouse, your friends, your family, you can just send them this link with all the code in it. This is a really, really good way to share your code, and it's a safe way to share your code, so people don't have to worry about downloading weird zip files or Google Drive or using Dropbox or anything like that. It's just simply CodePen, and tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people are using CodePen. It is completely safe. It's been around for a very long time. It's not going anywhere. This is a good service to use when you need to share your code. So when you're sharing your code, please share your CodePen link. Okay, if you need some extra support, I have a massive support group for you. So obviously you can ask questions down below. Please do, if that's your thing, ask questions down below. But if you want answers right away, like within minutes, sometimes even seconds, you're going to want to join some sort of support group. Now, learning HTML is actually quite easy. It's considered one of the easiest things to learn in web development. But that doesn't mean it's easy for everybody. And so if you need a little extra support, you can go to facebook.com and let's search in here for Learning to Code. And this group currently has 56,905 members. This is a group that I've created a long time ago. And again, there's 56,000 members in there. There's questions being asked all the time, people answering things all the time. For example, hi self-coders, my name is Dragos. He's got a good question in here, 132 comments. If I keep scrolling down, I participate in this. It is my group. Who here is interested in learning how web requests and web responses work? 59 comments. Okay, and I posted that 11 hours ago. So there's a lot of discussion in here, but you can ask questions like, how do I make something bold? How do I make something italic? Why is my code not working? Then share your CodePen link, please. Don't show a screenshot. I would highly recommend not showing a screenshot. I would highly recommend not copying and pasting your code into the Facebook group. Share it on CodePen, or with CodePen rather. So if you need any additional support, definitely join the Learning to Code Facebook group. It's completely free. You don't have to sign up for anything. It's completely free. It's just a nice little value add that I like to give to my students. But again, even that's optional. You don't have to. But if you would like a little extra support with timely responses, that is a really good place to be. Okay, let's take a look at your project. Your project is going to be relatively easy. You don't have to do everything in here. And remember, you don't have to memorize everything we've written in this course. You can always just Google it too. So if you're like, oh, I know what an H1 is, but I don't remember exactly how to make a link, that's fine. You could Google it. You type into Google, HTML link tutorial, and you're going to find hundreds, thousands, maybe even millions of pages that are going to show you exactly how to add a link. So remember, you don't need to actually remember all of this. All you need to know is how to find the answer. And that's honestly about 50% of any job as a web developer these days, is just knowing how to find the answers, not memorizing them, but being able to find the answers. So moving on to the project here, what I would like you to do is I would like you to create a new .html file. Then I would like you to create a header, so like an H1, subheader about like what you do, what you want to get into, anything like that. Add an image, and lastly, add a link to your Twitter, Insta, Facebook. It doesn't really matter. Just make sure you have at least one link. So let's do this. Create a 2.1. This would be a good time for a nested ordered list, by the way. 2.2. All right, so I just formatted that a little nicer just so that we could all read it together. So create a new HTML file. Make sure you've got a header in there, put your name in there, a subheader like your title, your work description, a favorite hobby, anything like that. Add an image of anything. I would say add an image of yourself. It's totally safe because it's just going to be on your computer. But if you would rather share your project with an image of something else, that's totally okay too. You can always go to unsplash.com and get a free image. Lastly, add a link to either your Twitter, your Instagram, or your Facebook, or just add a link to Google or something. The important part here is that you're going to add a link. So go ahead and give that a shot. If you ever get stuck, don't forget you can reference the other videos, or you can continue watching this video and I'll show you exactly how I do it. But I would like you to pause this video here and give this project a shot. Don't forget to share your project down below on this platform, if this platform offers that kind of feature. Otherwise, you can always share your progress with the Learning to Code Facebook group. So pause your video here. I'm going to give this about 5 seconds, and then I'm going to resume playing, and I'm going to show you exactly how I do this. Okay, so I'm going to create this project. I'm going to show you exactly how I do it. So first things first, new file. And I just did Command N, or you could go to File, New File. Save that. I'm going to save this to my desktop, and I'm going to call this caleb.html because this is my portfolio page. This is what I want to do. I need that HTML5 stuff in here. So I don't need the meta. We didn't talk about that. That's a little more advanced. And I don't need lang is equal to English. Again, that's a little more advanced. We don't need to worry about that. I'm going to change the title to Caleb's page. And what did I need to add in here? I needed to add a header that's 2.1 in this list. So a header H1. I'm going to put my name in here, Caleb Tallien. H2, I needed a subheader. So let's put something smaller in here, like an H3. Senior developer. And I am a premium coding instructor. That's my role in life. The role I have given myself. 2.3, add an image. Okay. So I already know that I have one image in here. It's not an image of me, but it is an image. And this is from a previous lesson. So I can do image src is equal to Caleb's image.jpg, and that's just in the same folder as this file. All of this lives on my desktop. It's in the same folder. Alt, Caleb Tallinn, and I want to give this a width, so it's not huge, of, I don't know, like 400. Lastly, I need a paragraph, right? No. I needed a link, but also I'm going to add a paragraph anyways. I don't really want to write a whole paragraph, so I'm going to throw some lorem in here. And then I needed a link to, let's say, Twitter. So this link could just be an anchor tag. href is equal to https twitter.com/Caleb Tallinn. You can also find me on Instagram if that's your jam. And let's put @Caleb Tallinn. And that's all there is to it. So I can go back to my browser and I can go File, Open File, and open up caleb.html. Let's hope I don't have any typos in there because that's going to be a little bit embarrassing. And boom, there is my HTML page. I've got an H1, I've got an H3 for my subtitle, I've got an image, and I have some lorem text in there. I just sort of threw that in willy-nilly at the last minute there, and a link to my Twitter, which brings me right to Twitter. And that's all there is to it. So I went pretty fast there, and I did that on purpose so that you'd have to pause and you might have to think a little bit harder. I want you to really work at something like this. But when you're done, please share your progress down below. Lastly, thank you so much for taking the time to take this course. I hope you learned something great and fun and new. And if you ever want to check out any of my other courses, just hit the link to my profile on this platform. You can see all of my courses are available here as well, including what to learn next, such as more advanced HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Python, PHP, a bunch of projects in between, all sorts of stuff. Thanks again for taking this course, and I hope to see you in another one.